Andre, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Is the government really giving your industry as much support and funding as it claims?
Good evening, Vuyon. Good evening to the viewers. I think what has been stated today by the President in his tweet about the billions of rand that is injected by government in our industry is not a fallacy, it is the truth. We are located in the industry and work in it every day, know that. If you just take the last 5 years as an example, more than 8 billion rand of government funding has been pumped into our industry, and that has saved thousands of jobs, and it has also had to create many, many others. So yes, we are very pleased that for the first time in a very, very long time, our industry is receiving the recognition through government support and government funding that it deserves.
But
most of
where
the
exactly?
funding, of course, has gone to modernize the...
Where exactly does this money go? What does it do?
Well, that is exactly what I was going to explain now. The bulk of that money is actually injected into our industry to modernize the industry. In other words, to build up modern machinery that can be used for modern production methods in the factories, and that in that manner push up the levels of productivity. That has been a great help. If you just look at the responses from industry to the President's tweet today, from CEOs, leaders of companies, it has been received with much appreciation for the support that has been rendered over the last few years. But more importantly, Vuyo, that has had an implication also in jobs. Thousands of jobs have been saved, and if you look back a few years ago, when we all know that there was a jobs bloodbath in our industry, and you just look at, for example, what has happened in clothing and in footwear, there's actually been positive job growth over the last few years, and a lot of that has to do with the tremendous support that we've received from the ANC national government.
Does that mean that you have been able to ward off the numerous challenges that you've had to face with, for example, imports from Asian countries, in particular China?
Well, it has helped, and it does help if we have that level of commitment or support from national government. If you take, for example, the Jobs Summit in October last year, one of the key problems that have been addressed there is the issue of illegal imports and the issue of illicit trade. And a commitment has been secured there to speed up and to recapacitate the investigation and the inspection unit of the South African Revenue Service, of course, as an example. All of that also finds expression in the ANC manifesto, when there is a clear commitment that in this elections and thereafter, that the issue of illegal imports and illicit trade will be tackled head-on. But there are many other things. Take, for example, the commitment to local procurement of our industry. I don't think that many South Africans know that government has begun to designate industry for local procurement, with a special focus on clothing, textiles, and footwear, which is the only industry that has received 100% designation from government. In simple terms, what that means is that every sphere of government, from national level to provincial level to local government level, government entities and state-owned enterprises are compelled by law to procure 100% of the goods and services from the local clothing and textile, footwear and leather sector. So we are very pleased with the level of support that we are receiving.
But what has been the response of industry? Have they been as committed as well? In other words, have they come to the party to invest more in your industry?
Well, as I've said earlier, one can just see the expressions of appreciation by senior leaders from industry, employers, to the President's positive tweet of this morning. But they are doing their bit. They're bringing some money to the party, but they're also working very hard to increase the level of output in our industry. If you look at the last 4 years alone, for example, there's been an average growth in production in the clothing, textile, footwear, leather industry of 8%, positive 8%. And if you disaggregate that into some of the components of the industry, take, for example, footwear, where it has increased by a massive 21%, and you take the issue of clothing or textiles, where it has increased by 15%, you can see that there's a seriousness amongst industry to deliver and to show in concrete expression of delivery and progression in the industry of the significant support that we are receiving from national government. We are pleased with that.
Have you been able to scrutinize the industry, but including your own fellow comrades? I remember one embarrassing thing at one COSATU Congress some years ago, where it was discovered that some of the garments that the workers were wearing at that particular Congress were in fact made in China. Are you keeping a tight lead on the industry and on everybody to ensure that they do not undo the gains that you've already made?
Well, Vuyo, you're referring to an incident that has happened many, many years ago. Since then, there has been a complete shift. COSATU, for example, is now completely committed to the issue of local procurement. If you look at the last National Congress of COSATU last year, there's been a tremendous effort to make sure that the paraphernalia for that Congress is locally sourced. So we've come miles and miles from the disaster that has happened a few years ago. And we are, of course, also pleased with that. All of that, of course, found expression within the alliance and in the ANC manifesto for a bigger and a more forceful commitment to support and to promote the buy local campaign. You know, it is very nice. You know, I think most South Africans and national government now recognize that local is lekker.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much for your time. Andre Kriel, who is the Deputy General Secretary of the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union.